I want to make sure this is not a lecture, this is interactive. Adults don't learn anything unless you're interacting. So I don't take questions at the end. If you guys want to jump in, please, during my 25 minutes, ask questions, feedback. A little reason why I do this. I do this for a mercenary reason, which is why we all have flyers. So 2-minute advertisement. I'm involved in about 6 different military organizations in Dallas. We raise in the low 7 figures for military veterans and their families, just like you do. So I do shotgun tournaments, I do golf tournaments, I do other types of events. The flyers you have in front of you are all something you can come to. I do a book club, military book club once a month at Presto Country Club. And we bring in speakers, and we have interaction. The book club is a discussion. The one I'll focus on September 11th. Actually, the update, General General Campbell, 3-star, is going to be, who's a former liaison, military liaison to the CIA. He's going to be speaking about the mission of the CIA in the 21st century. So it's going to be 7:30 on the 11th. If you want to buy breakfast, $20. If you don't want to buy breakfast, just come. But we do these book clubs as a catalyst to promote our golf tournaments, our shotgun tournaments. We did I just told your incoming president, we did a shotgun tournament last year at the Dallas Gun Club for the Texas Rangers, and we raised $3.2 million. So that's why I do these things. So please come to my book clubs. So let's talk about, when I got asked to speak a few months ago, it was about Hamas. I'm going to update this a little bit because something's happened in the Middle East that's Hamas, right? We've had Iran, we've had Syria. So we're going to have a conversation. The way you're going to retain this knowledge, and I'm going to give you some feedback, is not me lecturing, but asking questions. So let me throw a question out to you. Because I almost got thrown out of the 4 synagogues I'm members of, but because we do Torah study classes and I convert them to talking about politics. So let me throw a question out to you. By the way, how many people are military law enforcement veterans? Thank you. So if you were the chief of staff of the United States military and you're an ally of Israel, with what just happened with eliminating, to some degree, some of the nuclear threat in Iran, would you have gone further and had a regime change in Iran? So let me just take a few minutes of feedback from you all. You think, don't forget what happened in 1991. You watch what happened. Bush Sr. defeated the leader of Iraq, but didn't have regime change. And we had to fight a war again. So what do you guys think? Should the United States and Israel have pressed for regime change in Iran? Give me some feedback.
I would argue no.
Tell me why, sir.
You don't have a good record of being able to do anything after going there and screw it up.
Okay. I get that feedback a lot from some of my friends. Give me an opposing view. Anybody have an opposing view? I'll give you ammunition. They're talking right now, the leadership of Iran, the National Guard is still there, some of the clerics are still there, so they're talking about rearming some of the militias. And they're talking about rearming some of the militias, and they're talking about the fact that we have not destroyed all the nuclear resources of Iran. So there's a possibility in the next about 3 months, 6 months, a year, this nuclear threat can be there again. So give me some feedback about that. If the regime change has not changed, is there going to be a nuclear threat against Israel in the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, that's a possibility, but I also think status quo is going to stay about the same. You can't really trust who's in control now, but our experience has also shown us that you can't always trust who replaces who goes in as well.
So let me give you some.
Kind of a double-edged sword.
That's very valid. Let me give you some data. I don't want just to be interact. I want to give you some data what's happening, and I'll give you some hard assets. By the way, the intelligence I get is coming from open sources, and I do have a lot of other sources I get. I go to a lot of meetings. I have a lot of friends in the Israeli military, and as some of you know who are intelligence, unlike a CIA friend, if you were in the CIA, you can tell somebody you're in the CIA. If you were in Mossad, what's Mossad, by the way? If I have a lot of friends who are ex-IDF, I know they were in Mossad, but they can't tell me. So if you're in Mossad, you can't ever talk about who you were. But let's talk about what happened this past week in Syria. That's the new situation. The U.S., Israel, and Syrian officials, repeat, Syria and the Israeli officials met in Paris. So the Syrians technically have not met with the Israelis, but they are in Paris to talk about de-escalating tensions over there. This is the first time ever that in the past 20 years that Syria and Israel have had direct talks. You have the gentleman named the foreign minister of Syria, and I always pronounce these names wrong, Assad al-Shabani. You had the Israeli minister, who I met many times, the foreign minister, Rod Dermer, whose background's America, U.S., and you have the special envoy to Syria, you see on TV a lot, Tom Barak. They met. Barak, not Barack the president, but Tom's Barak, B-A-A-R-A-K-K, basically stated that the Israeli and Syrian officials did achieve their goal of dialogue. Israeli officials told the Syrians that the meeting was to maintain a ceasefire between Israel and Syria. So, by the way, Israel and Syria were not fighting until when? What happened? What happened a few weeks ago? Why did Israel now escalate their military activity in Syria? What was Syria doing that got the Israelis and the Americans upset? Who said that? The Kurds. But not only the Kurds, you have the Druze. Who are the Druze? Remember, that was the big concern. They were fighting the Kurds. They were basically putting the Kurds in danger. Who are the Kurds? You've heard the name, the Kurds. The Kurds are a old Arab Shiite group. They go back to the time of Muhammad, or before that. But they broke away about 1,000 years ago. They're Arabs. They're Muslim. They're called Druze. What makes them different in Israel is the fact that they are most of the Arabs living in Israel, majority of them are not in the Israeli army. They're not citizens. Druze are active citizens of Israel. They fight in the Israeli army. So they're Arabs. But they're strong supporters, they're citizens. And what Syria was doing, what their leader was doing, was having military activity against the Jews, which is why Israel stepped in. Let's go back a little bit of history. I mean, some of you probably, like me, I go to Torah study to argue with my rabbi. You guys probably, when you guys read the Old Testament, we call it the Tanakh. Israel has had interesting relationships with Egypt. The last time we fought Egypt was when? In a war.
86?
No. Before that, 1973 was the last time we fought Israel. I mean, we fought Egypt. When I say Egypt, I'm saying Israel. We really have been fighting Jordan. We stopped fighting Jordan in 73. But when's the last time the Israeli military stopped fighting Syria? They haven't. Go back 3,000 years, 4,000 years. I mean, Israel and Egypt, historians have been fighting. You know, you go back many, many years, but since 73, we stopped fighting Egypt as a country. We have been fighting Syria for 4,000 years ongoing. Back when Israel, the state of Israel during the time of the kings was at peace with Egypt. Matter of fact, they were allies of Egypt when they went out to attack the Babylonians. That was interesting. And basically in 608 BCE, the Egyptian army came through northern Israel to attack the Babylonians, and the king said, don't go through. And Necho said, yes, I am. But they were basically, he was attacking a common enemy. The Egyptians have not always been an enemy of Israel. But go through your Bible. We have always fought Syria. Syria has always been, during the time of 840 BC, there was a time when the first documentation that the state of Israel actually existed, the Davidic dynasty existed, when they found in tablets in Tel Deston in 1991, Hazal, king of Syria, killed Jeroboam, king of Israel, and Azariah, king of the house of David. That goes back 840 BC. We've always been fighting Syria for basically thousands of years, even when Israel didn't exist. This is the first time there might be peace. Ever. Now, this current leader is trying to make peace. Now, they're still negotiating. And now, what's the big attack against Shabbat? What's the biggest knock against him? What's his background? The head of Syria, the president. He's what? He was what? What was? Remember, he was considered a terrorist, right? So let me throw it out to you. And I argue with my rabbis about this. Has there ever been any prime minister of Israel that has ever had a terrorist background?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, tell me who.
When Israel was created, when they came out of the British mandate, all of the leaders at that time were considered terrorists.
Well, yes and no. So get education out. You have, when Israel was created in 47, 48, you have the regular army, which was the Palmach and the IDF. And by the way, making this relevant, and who's heard of the Jewish Brigade? Going back to 47, 48. Jewish Brigade were English soldiers who fought in the, Jews who fought in the English army from 1939 to 1945. 30,000 of them. In 1944, when they were invading Italy, the English army allowed the Jews to form their own separate fighting force called the Jewish Brigade. That's the first time in 2,000 years there was a separate Jewish fighting force. And they fought as a, they were part of the English army, but they fought as a 30,000. They fought as a Jewish fighting force from 44 to 45. My great uncle was part of that fighting force. In 1947-48, came back to the continent when the Israelis were outnumbered 6-1 by the Arab armies. Give me history, by the Syrians, by the Egyptians. The reason they won that war, partly, they were outgunned, outmanned. They had 5,000 members of the Jewish Brigade as their officer corps. People don't know that. That was the officer corps of the IDF. So we had those officer corps of the IDF in 1947-48 were basically English veterans who had been fighting for 6 years in World War II. The other side didn't have that. But going back, they were members of the IDF and the Palmach. That's over here. Over here, getting to the right, you have what's called the Irgun. Who here has seen, I watch a lot of movies, my son owns a movie theater, Exodus, right? Exodus. Exodus was basically about the ship, which is true ship. It was commanded by a former IDF officer, remember Jewish Brigade, Paul Newman, who happened to be Jewish. But the point was that that was the Palmach and the IDF. But in that movie, you had his uncle, who was fictional to some degree, who was Menachem Begin. So going back to your question, Menachem Begin was head of the Irgun. The Irgun were somewhat terrorists. They were the ones who blew up the King David Hotel. But it was the military headquarters, and they told them they were going to blow it up. So definition of terrorist, maybe not, because he went after military leadership, but he was a member of the Irgun. And he became prime minister in 1977. Who's ever heard of Yitzhak Shamir? He was prime minister in the 90s. Yitzhak Shamir was a member of the Stern Gang in World War II. Stern Gang was far to the right. They were terrorists. Stern Gang were people that after World War II said, we need to kill every German who ever existed. They wanted to basically poison the German water supply and kill every civilian. That was a prime minister of Israel. His name was Yitzhak Shamir. He's one of the most highly decorated soldiers of the IDF. But he comes from a terrorist background. So my point is, Israel has had prime ministers who are terrorists. So the guy who's leading Syria right now is maybe a reformed terrorist, maybe not. But going back to the fact that I think it's worthwhile to negotiate with him. So what's happening right now is, and you have a map, by the way, of what's happening in over there. But let's talk about, that's one area. Let's also move a little bit to Iran. And by the way, I am a strong believer that there should be regime change. 1979, some of you were not around then. Some of you were. Where is Iran in terms of relations with Israel and the United States under the Shah?
They were good at that time.
Define good.
They weren't fighting.
It wasn't just good. The Iranian government under the Shah were the major military trading partner of the state of Israel. It wasn't just good. they were very strong military allies. There was a large Jewish community still in Iran at that time. Going back how far? Give me a history lesson. How far did the Jewish community in Iran go back? Iran used to be called what? And who was the king of Persia who in 530 BC, after he defeated the son of Nebuchadnezzar, allowed the Jews to come back after the first temple was destroyed? He said, you guys can come back and rebuild this temple. Who was that?
Julius.
No, that was his son. You're close. Who? That was actually Derek. He's grandson. Cyrus. Cyrus is considered, the Orthodox Jews call Cyrus the Messiah, because he was considered one of the greatest friends of Israel. So Iran has had a long-term relationship with Israel and Jews going back thousands of years. There was a Jewish community of 30, 40,000 living in Iran under the Shah, well, maybe more than that. Most of them have left. But the Jewish community goes back in Iran, or Persia, goes back thousands of years. In 1979, that all stopped. Did Iran have a good relationship with the United States before 1979? Yes, you weren't born then, but we were major. Now what's happening? Where are they ranked? Where does Iran rank axis of evil? Who are the countries in the axis of evil facing the United States? Tell me the countries.
North Korea.
Who else?
China.
And well, China's a surrogate, but they were. And who's the other one major?
Iran.
Now, look at Iran for a second. A few years ago, Iran was a major military and political threat to the state of Israel. How am I doing on time?
You're good.
Okay, so look what's happened in the past 2 years. They were the financing source behind 7 different fronts facing Israel in a war. This is pretty bad. This was the worst Israel had been facing. And again, I've been to Israel many times. I've been a volunteer. I actually, in 2006, I volunteered, and I spent 2 weeks driving medical supplies from Jerusalem to Metula to Kiryat Shimon. We're diverting for a second, as my friend who was a sergeant in the reserves was telling me when 150 Katyusha rockets were landing. He said, Bob, don't worry about the Katyusha rockets. They won't kill you, but the shrapnel will. So I did it as a volunteer. But the point is that things have changed. Iran was the funding source behind Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. Hamas has basically been destroyed, just mostly in Gaza. Hezbollah in the north with 150,000 missiles, they've been destroyed. Houthis not yet. We were facing military threat from militias in Syria. That's been eliminated. When Assad went down, what did Israel do? Didn't make a lot of national news. We destroyed most of the military resources Syria had facing us. That has been a threat since 1948. Syria is no longer a military threat to the state of Israel at all. Because during this time frame when Assad went down and he was trying to recoup power, we destroyed all their military hardware. Syria no longer exists as a military threat, or Hezbollah. Lebanon no longer does. We're going to take out the Houthis. That's our next step. The only other threat is Iran. But Iran is still a threat if they can rearm. So I'm a firm believer, and a lot of my American military friends are firm believers, that there needs to be regime change. Now, how do you do regime change? We had a Special Forces three-star general speak to one of my military groups about 2 weeks ago. He knows much more than I do. So I give you my feedback from not just my feedback, but from what I'm learning from my friends. And I asked him this question. How do we have regime change? He's a firm believer in regime change. He said, otherwise Iran will be a major threat. So let me throw it out to you. I'm arguing with you, but except how do you do successful regime change, in your opinion? How do you make sure there is a successful regime change in Iran? And by the way, the American military wants this to happen. Is this done by the U.S.? Is it done by Israel?
Done by the people. People of Iran.
Okay, so your first name is?
Griff.
Griff. So, yes and no. Being devil's advocate, if you read some of the briefings, there are 2 major groups in Iran that are looking for regime change. One of them is supported by the former Shah's son, when he was here. He wants regime change. He wants to come back and be Shah again. However, that's fantasy. He has no support in Iran. People in Iran hate his guts. There's a second group in Iran which hates him, hates the Shah, hates the monarchy, was supporting Khomeini back in 1979. They broke it away, called ILM. They have a group in Iran. They're fundamentalists, but they're fundamentalists against Khomeini. So that's an internal group. But can that group do it? And one of the recommendations by our intelligence is that we try to have these two groups get together. They won't. By the way, before I get to the recommendation, how is Israel so successful with their agents destroying all the infrastructure, or a lot of the infrastructure in Iran? Remember, we had a lot of technology, we had drones. How did Israel, and this is getting back to my question of how it can be done before I close. How is Israel, there were thousands of agents in Iran destroying the infrastructure. And some of the media said that was all Mossad. And get back to your question. Mossad is a very small agency. They don't have enough manpower. It's very hard to get Mossad. The thousands of people in Iran that were destroying the infrastructure, that were basically agents, were not Mossad. You know who they were? What's that?
Iranians.
They were Iranians. But were they working by themselves? They were Iranian special ops. Where'd they get trained? I'm impressed. How'd you know that? Because that's not why these thousands of Iranians that were special ops, they weren't just militias, were trained in Israel. So they work for this. So the point is, there is groups in Iran. You have the special ops, you have this other organization, but and I asked the three-star general, are they powerful enough to destroy the Iranian army? You know, the guard. He said no. No. But it's a combination, sir. What he said is, it can't be the Israelis, that would be accepted, and it can't be the US for different reasons. But he said there needs to be external Middle East countries that it's in their best interest to support what's happening in Iran. And he basically said a few. He said, first of all, the UAE. They need to be funding this. And he said the biggest country is Kuwait. And guess who the biggest source is who needs to step up to the table? Saudi Arabia. It's definitely in their interest. As you know, the current king doesn't like Israel. His son, the prince, has already had active discussions. He recognizes that the best solution to solving peace in the Middle East is what's happening right now, the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords are economic partnerships between the Arab countries and Israel. If you're doing business together, are you going to fight?
No.
Jordan's doing that right now. Egypt's trying to do it. But they're not wealthy countries. UAE and Saudi Arabia, they see tremendous opportunity. The Israelis bring technology to the table. What Israel has that they don't have is, as you probably guys know, drones and artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. That's Israel's strength. There are 50 companies based in Beersheba that are the headquarters of the cybersecurity industry of the world. They all got trained being in special forces in Israel. My point is, that's the opportunity. The opportunity is economic alliance. So the closing comments are that the recommendations, there needs to be the UAE, Kuwait, and Saudi working with these groups in Iran. That regime change. Before I close, I did talk too much. Closing comments, questions, give me some feedback. How much time we got? 5 minutes?
Oh, you're good. 8 minutes.
Okay,
So-
give me some feedback. Questions, comments.
And one of the problems with regime change in the past has been that we support the person that we want in there and then disappear.
That's true.
So, in order for that to work, there's got to be a lot more support from our country.
Well, you have to, I agree, it has to be initiated by us, but the difference
And
between, what you said is correct. They looked at regime change, it didn't work in Iraq. But it did work in other countries before. We had regime change in Japan after World War II, and we had regime change in Germany after World War II. That worked out pretty well, but your point's well taken. Germany had been a, now benefit, the difference is Japan had never been a capitalist country, now it is. We incorporated capitalism into Japan. Germany had been a capitalist country. A lot of those major companies were owned by Jews who were killed, but Germany had a track record. Iran has had, unlike Iraq, has a track record of capitalism. And so the difference would be first Iraq and Iran, we'd have to have other moving parts. We didn't have the Abraham Accords with Iraq. We have them now. So your point's well taken. There needs to be regime change needs to be supported by economic opportunities and a history. The other side of the coin is I have a lot of Iranian friends who came here and their grandsons and granddaughters still live there. And where does that next generation go on the weekends? They go up in the mountains. So they're just afraid of the guard. What else needs to happen for regime change? You brought up a good point. Accept it, yeah? Great champ? No. Yes, sir.
Well, I'll answer your question with a question. How do you see the role of the news outlets and so forth in this?
I'm sorry, what?
Media. What do you see as the opportunity, or what do you see as the just the barriers? I see the media. And I hear certain reports, and then more than that, because honestly, I don't really pay attention to a whole lot of that. I get my news from where I want to get my news. I don't get it from who wants to tell me what they think is happening. But I hear people that are a lot of times older than I am, and I feel like they aren't as versed in being critical thinkers and so forth.
Yes, sir.
And they're swayed. Like they tell me, I can't believe Israel's going after Hamas and things like that. And it makes me angry because I see the things in the media that are swaying that opinion. What is your opinion on that?